Welcome to A Table in a Tavern, your community RPG podcast. Every episode, we'll explore the depths of immersive storytelling, character creation, and mechanics that make ttrpgs so captivating. Whether you're a dungeon master, a player, or just a curious listener, there's a seat for you at our table. So grab your ale, pull up a chair, and let's embark on this journey together. Welcome to the Tavern. Hello everybody, this is GM Keegan, and as always, DM Knock, and a special guest, Dwight, long time, some would say old school DM, in the, let's be friendly, the grognard category of the hobby, Dwight. And he's bringing his expertise and knowledge as we talk about 1974 wisdom for the 2024 player. We have a special list that's brought out, and we're going to go by them one by one and see if the wisdom of the old days still holds up. First one is be prepared. That sounds like the most generic, basic one. What does that mean? What does that advice entail, and what did it look like there compared to now? Dwight, what did it look like back in your old days when they were having RPG sessions by campfire?
Where we had to make our dice out of rocks and chisels.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, the write-up, and I'm going to give a little history about it. They are 5 points. That was originally done by Gygax and Arneson. If you don't know who Gygax and Arneson is, they're the creators of D&D and Chainmail, which was based on. But being prepared back in the day was making sure that everything was ready for the players so that they didn't have to wait on you. It is the most frustrating thing in the world for me, especially with, and I'm going to pick on the young folks, get off my lawn, damn it. You know, the young folks, they're not getting prepared before they show up at the game. They're showing up. They don't have their stuff prepped. They don't have their maps ready. They don't have anything ready. And they think they're doing a good job, and all it does is slow the game down, causes hiccups. You don't have as much play time, and it's all based on the GM, DM, referee, storyteller. So if you're not prepared, you can delay the game and just cause the game that should be good to go off poorly.
So are these bullet points? Yeah, these are bullet points for DMs, right? Not for players.
Yeah, well, you could probably use them for players as well, to be honest.
Swing it both ways. Okay. Yeah, because first of all, I had no idea what this list was when you guys were trying to prep me on this. I had zero clue. I do know who Gygax is. I've heard that these referenced as the laws of Gygax before. But be prepared. Is it solely meta, like outside the game? Like, hey, I got my dice here, I got all the players' character sheets, all the tables are good. The physical aspect of it, or is it talking about the be prepared story-wise session, whatever session you're working on, whatever adventure you're working on? Because I feel like that's a little bit of a gray area. Like it might be different. Totally correct me if I'm wrong. But back in the day, it was probably more serious gameplay, I would imagine. Nowadays, murder hobo wasn't probably a thing back then, but it definitely is now. And players now tend to look for the comedy in the game and less seriousness.
Yeah, let me get my thoughts together. I'm old. Yes, what you said is correct. It's all of the above, pretty much. Even a player needs to be prepared. What am I going to talk about? Where's the story going? How should I interact with people? What's an ongoing thing I need to deal with? There are too many players that show up at the game and go, what do we do? What are we doing? And you're not prepared. You're supposed to be here with a joint storytelling. And that's how I view role-playing games. You're together to create a story.
Yeah.
It's not about, it is about the combat. And there are people that show up to play and just want to do the combat. And that's perfectly fine. But you as the DM need to have a vibrant, ready world. So when I talk about a DM being prepared, if you have a possibility of an NPC, a non-player character, being encountered, you need to have a plan. Even if it's just a simple, this is what this kind of guy is. You just write down a simple snippet. Shopkeeper's a jerk. He's like Keegan.
It's a relatable character. I get it. Speaking of relatable characters and jerks, but what about like the contrast? Like, are you saying that there's no value? Because maybe he just didn't know, these early folks that were trying to figure out what a role-playing game is. They didn't understand the value of improv. when you're just off the cuff. So if you're being prepared, maybe you're just too prepared and they just don't understand it that, no, like nowadays, it can go in a million directions. Improv is much more valuable. So a lesson that should be on the table?
Right. Like, is it obsolete to think this?
No. Every DM should know his world, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So you should be prepared in any contingency that could occur. That's like the first point. Prepared plan for contingencies. There are certain things that could happen that progress the story. You need to know what those are. You as the DM need to have a time frame. The players, if they go off on a tangent, you should have thought of what could happen. And I'm not saying that you have to be a mind reader. You just have to say, okay, my players are at X town. What is happening in X town? You're not just going, okay, you guys are in town, and not having a plan for it. Why are they here? What are they doing? What could happen? What are encounters that could happen? I mean, something as simple as a lot of third-party content, and even a couple of the books that Wizards puts out has rolling charts of you're in this area. I mean, the Monster Manual and the DM's Guide has huge charts. Even having a chart prepared for interactions that they could have. Too many DMs that I've seen today show up, pull the module out, blow the dust off of it, and go, all right, what page were you? Oh, there's my bookmark. They're not ready. I mean, at least read your freaking module.
Okay. I want to jump in on this so bad. So preparedness, yeah. First of all, impossible to be prepared for every contingency. I love it, absolutely love it when my players surprise me. But but I'm also pretty. I'm not the best, but I will say that I'm pretty good at improv. So being able to think of something on the fly, of what a sort of reasoning, or something to counter their silliness, right, and then bring it back on the dial a little bit. There's a lot of things that can be done with that, but being prepared for everything is so impossible unless you have what is called, Keegan, help me out here,
Quantum ogres are amazing.
Never mind. That's for another time.
Now, being prepared, if you're over-prepared, isn't it just like a kinder, fancier railroad? Because you're just forcing them to do something? Or are you just like... Because if you plan every contingency, which we can't do in real life, even supercomputers can't do that. We have to do approximations. So where does the prep end? Because I think there's value absolutely in being prepared, to the point that I think being prepared allows you to improv way better. Because if you don't have a resource in your head, aka even if you're reading the module, whatever it is, if you don't have something in your head, then you're pulling it out from the dark side, and it may be golden, but I think the structure of the reality, aka
it's the essence of it.
Yes, I think you do have a breakdown of the essence of like the immersion that we're all sitting in and having this imaginative moment. I think there is a slow erosion of that if you don't have something locked in your brain.
And I do agree with you, Dwight, when you said, you don't. Okay, I guess my interpretation of it, and this is the new gamer interpretation of it. Be prepared is such, the way it was described is such an absolute, but that doesn't mean you have to have all the answers right there. You just have to have the means for the answers, like Dwight was saying, right? The random tables, the first iteration of AI, folks.
You're not wrong. That's Now that we've gotten into this, I'm starting to go, how do I explain this? You're not prepared to give them the story. You're prepared to give them the experience, the mood of everything, the essence of the environment that they're in. That's your preparedness. The storyline, to be honest, you could fake a storyline. I mean, I've had to.
Yeah, I think that's probably a better angle of it. Prepare to build and have a presentation ready. I think is way, way, way more important than all the little breadcrumbs of understanding every part of a story, but because the story is what's going to happen, it's the part we all play out. But I think that part, do we have enough to build the structure?
Yeah, do we have enough do we have enough preparedness to handle anything that happens? And whether that's just through experience or whether that's you sitting down and saying, if they go to this bar, there's going to be a fight going on. If they go outside of town in this direction, then this could happen. And it's just you simply sitting down and preparing as a GM, jotting down a few notes and saying, you know, somebody could be robbing a town here, and I'm just going off the cuff here. Someone could be robbing the bank in the town here. It's going to happen at 8:00 at night. So at 8:00 at night, there's going to be commotion, and where that comes from and how that leads out and what they do is all up to them. I hate railroading people into follow my story because I created this and I worked on this. No, I'm prepared that if they go off in a different direction, I might have thought about it. And I am one of these guys that over prepares now, all because of back in the day, because you really, module writing today, module writing back then is a totally different can of worms. Totally different can of worms. But just being prepared for the contingencies, being prepared when they want to go to the magic shop. You got to decide, is there a magic shop in town? Is the town big enough to even have a magic shop? How much are the prices? Will the prices here be higher or lower than comparison to the DMG player's handbook? You know, it could be a poor town and poorer quality stuff. Those kind of things is what you need prepared for when it comes to story. But the main thing that I have the issue with new players is, again, pulling out the module and going, okay, where are we? You're the DM. You're supposed to know where you are.
Exactly. There's value in it as a principle, and maybe shouldn't think that's a law set in stone, but as a principle, it's great.
No, it's not a law.
Which we're going to move on now into the second one is be consistent. I think this is a really, really, really important one. And the Cliff Notes version is that it applies to rulings when we're engaging with the players. And that consistency, I think, is a really, really valuable thing. Well, what's like the principle behind it that Gygax was trying to get at? Maybe he has a different reason why I think those words are great. Maybe he goes off in a different direction.
It's a Dragon magazine. One of the first ones that he talked about being consistent in rulings. It's just basically make sure the players know the rules. Don't change the rules on it, because the most frustrating thing is you've tried this before and it's worked every time, but he's decided, it's not going to work here. No reason, just it's not going to work here. And that does nothing but create strife, a little bit of anger. It makes the story go off in a wrong direction. And you just got to make sure that you have your rules not memorized. And that's where a lot of people think that you have to memorize the rules and be a rules lawyer. It's just every time you make a ruling, if you disagree with a rule, being consistent with how you disagree with that rule. Being consistent from player to player to player. Like this guy attacks and rolls a 17, the armor class is a 17, you hit. This guy attacks later on and he rolls a 17 and he misses. Well, that's not consistent.
But what if the final strike is it's been 17 the whole time and you want the guy to have a great ending? So you're like, this dude's going to hit as long as it just grazes it. And 15 is going to be it today because he's going to have the final strike since he's going to take out the bad guy that killed his parents and finally get revenge. And this is the moment that the whole table's been waiting for. This is iconic. Or do we just like let it pass over and Bill, the bard that is not really emotionally connected to it, he happens to have an aura that does 2 points of damage and that was enough to kill him. Like,
rule of cool, man.
Does that contradict the
rule of cool? Yes, exactly. Does rule of cool override be consistent?
Yes. When it's those situations. Because the situation that you describe is pretty much how I would have handled that. if the person is already near death, he's hurt, and you could explain that mechanically he's got 4 hit points, and people seem to forget that mechanically if somebody has 50 hit points and now they have 4, they're hurt, they're stumbling, they can't move around as well. Being descriptive, which is I think the next point, and building the story upon that because he took so much damage, his armor class was lessened. He was unable to move quicker. So making it cool, especially if it's that kind of a player that this is something that he has worked for and worked up to, and he has struggled to find those that killed his family, and he's finally here in front of them. That creates good story.
So I think we found a crack in the consistency of Gygax that.
Nope.
But fudging the numbers? It reducing. What if he only did 4 damage, but it was supposed to be he only had 5 health? Are we being consistent? Like, no, you need to hardcore smash this person because the dice rule everything. Above all, the dice are law. Like, we put them in front of us. If not, we're just making it up as we go along. What's the point of dice?
To be consistent means if you do that for one player, you got to do that for all players.
So as long as you're fudging it for or adjusting, we don't call it fudging, adjusting anything, you're doing it for the betterment of everybody.
Oh, the story, yeah.
Okay. No picking favorites is what I mean.
Yeah, it's like rules is written, and I have a big problem with Wizards of the Coast with the way that they do their books. Did you know that the player's handbook for 5e has like 11 printings? And the wording's changed.
I 100% understand that. I do not want to dive into that. Like, that's a can of worms. That's
a whole nother podcast series.
It's a totally thing, and I agree that they definitely need to look into their printings and all sorts of things. But just the principle that we're focusing on.
Yeah, the principle being consistent is
consistently. Okay, so consistently treat everybody the same way, even if it's in their favor. Of like, yeah, you didn't do enough damage, but we're going to roll with it because that consistently we're going to make sure everybody has that rule of cool fun moment.
Yeah. And it's to make sure you don't have favorites.
But what if somebody's a better role player or has a better character? What about you, Nock? Which one of your players do you favor more than the others?
Well, I'll answer that in a second, but I wanted to chime in with the whole fudging the example that you gave, right? Which was fudging the hit point total. And it's like, oh yeah, this was built up for that one particular player. They don't know that. It doesn't freaking matter. They don't know how much hit points they got. They shouldn't know how much AC that adversary has. If a 17 hit earlier and a 17 hit doesn't hit now, that would be more obvious. But the hit point thing, they're not going to know. They shouldn't know. So yeah, by all means, you could totally just go, oh yeah. Well, you know what? I got 10 hit points left on my marker, but it'd be better if this guy actually killed him with only 7 damage. You're not going to tell them that. You shouldn't have to. So inherently, I feel like as DMs, we break the consistency law anyway.
But it's not being, because I don't view it as being consistent as being a rules lawyer or raw. I don't view that. I view that as being consistent throughout your rulings.
Okay. So if we're gonna, all right. So we're just gonna consistently play the rule of cool. Then
sure.
That coincides with everything. My favorite player at my table is the one that just goes nuts with their character, more in the role play sense. I don't know how this is going to be relevant to anything, but yeah, I don't know.
What was their name again? Just so we can have it out there, just between the three of us. What was the name of your favorite player?
We'll say Ken. we had him on a podcast.
Okay, do you hear that? Anybody else that listened to that podcast that Ken's going to be on?
Yeah.
He was on the podcast because it was Knox's favorite. And we're going to move on to 3.
Wow.
Be descriptive. And it won't be edited out. Okay, so be descriptive. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this one because I think it's the one
Most
that
common?
we can. No, I think it's the one that we can spend the most amount of time on. I think we can always find more examples. Is be descriptive. There's a couple listed that's from like the old or the bullet points that we had to set up. What are some of the important ones? Just focus on one important thing, like why being descriptive is important for the table.
One word: immersion.
Perfect.
Anybody and everybody that plays role-playing games is trying to escape their life. And anybody can say otherwise, but it's the truth. Looking at it psychologically, everybody is into a role-playing game to play a role.
Absolutely. Even Ken, the best player on Knox table,
Okay,
he
all
would
right,
like to
all right.
escape.
All right. He's not trying to escape my table.
No,
okay?
he's trying to escape reality to get into your table.
But what I will say is be descriptive in 1974 versus 2024 is different. Hands down is way different. I don't know why I started getting into an accent there. Doesn't matter. Because when, again, and this goes back to when we were talking about the first one, where I feel like when these came out, there was the mindset of the players was just totally different. Nowadays, we have a lot of people that have shorter attention spans. They don't want the all 5 senses description. They just want to see what they see, hear, maybe touch. They don't need to know what the air tastes like. You get a subtle taste of poop inside this cave. Must be a troll. There's nothing like that anymore. Right. I think a lot of it now is it's the same 5 rules that we're going over here apply to that older crowd, the 1974 crowd, differently, but parallel to the 2024, which is what we're talking about. Yeah. And like I said, the whole descriptive thing, like you can look at some of the popular Let's Plays, right? Won't mention any of them. You all know what they are. There are certain differences between describing the scene, setting the scenes from each podcast that you watch, even if you watch live ones. And it's all good, but I don't think there's a set standard that people have to do. Does that make sense? Because I think that standard is different now.
Yeah, nowadays, and back in the olden days, we all came from wargaming. I mean, that's Chainmail started the D&D. Chainmail was a war game, and the guys just went, hey, wouldn't it be fun if we had these guys that keep surviving, be in a little group and go around and fight dragons and stuff instead of war? And that's how it started. Back in the day, when you had war games, here's your environment, that's a tree, that's a river, there you go, you can see it. A role-playing game is the odyssey of the mind, or where you're having to do that. And it was a very encouraging thing to tell DMs back in the day. Describe the environment. All right, you walk into a room. It's got a Diaz in the middle of it. Well, that doesn't give people immersion, especially back in the day. Nowadays, people have seen all these live play shows. I guess we shouldn't mention any of them, but you watch these shows and they still are very descriptive about the environments that you're in, and it helps get the player into that mindset. But you're right, today there are so many people that have come into the hobby that come from the acting side of things. I'm going to mention Critical Role. There are a bunch of actors. They're acting. If you look at Dungeon Dudes, they are hardcore rules guys. I mean, they love looking at rules and how to break the game and how to make it better. And you got guys on DM's Guild that go into these descriptive areas of where they create these modules and they want to describe things. And once you get into that game, describing the environment helps the player to make a decision. And you're right, back in the old days, we all came from war games where you saw it and all you had to do was, I need to roll a 6 to kill that guy. Now, it's a different game. It actually is a different game. It's now improv. You said it earlier. It's now an improv session amongst friends.
I think nothing's changed. I think absolutely nothing's changed. I think this is one of the most consistent things. Because the variety of tables, you can go to them and be like, I'm in 1974. I don't think it's changed. I've played with people over the 3 decades, and when I talk to other tables, I'm like, oh, you've been doing it just 180 degrees from me, but the advice I think is still the same. I think the description is necessary always, and I think it's always valuable, and it only changes per table, like everything else. Because when you come at it and you can be like, well, it's changed because people are have a certain view because it's more flowery or they understand this or that. And I think that's absolutely untrue. Every table, you're going to have these hardcore combat guys because we're talking D&D mainly, right? And other people are like, well, I've expanded towards other games and D&D is just part of it. Now, granted, this is about Gygax and now, so we're in that realm, right? We're talking about D&D. But I think there's enough people from a variety of tables that it's always necessary, and you just need to find the right kind of description for your table. I've heard people say, I only give a little bit and let the people fill in the rest. Other ones are like, I want to evoke an emotion. Other ones are, I want to set a tone. And whatever it is, I think it's you're playing to other humans, aka the players, at that table. And I don't think it's that alone, that little part, that nugget, that principle has ever changed in the past 50 years.
No, I 100% agree with that. It's just the amount. And I think you're right. It's what is descriptions, right? Like it's literally just information. We are giving information to our players. Knowing our players is what gives us the power to tweak that information. Do I know that my players are more observant? Do I think they'll pick up on the subtle hint that I'm going to throw into this description? Would my players even like that? Do they just see it all as white noise and they just want to know, how do I attack that guy?
Who do I kill?
Right, exactly. So I think it's just how our players process that information. And to some level, like I was just talking to Keegan before the podcast, I love world building. And we have another podcast on that coming out. But that for me, that's my enjoyment. But I know that not all of my players at the table absorb everything. As much as I want to force that immersion onto them, it's not the time or place. So again, I look at it as, yeah, Keegan, you're right. It's the same thing. It's been, let's give as much information, as much description as possible, but you cater it to your group.
And I think
I agree.
An example of that, of why this principle has never changed and has always been necessary, is you can go back and read older books, and people will still say, this old book is one of my top 10 favorite of all times. They can jump back to Dune, or to, since we're talking fantasy, you can jump back to Lord of the Rings. And people will talk about some of the way those things are described. And they describe them in very different ways. And yet people still talk about the imagery that was put upon them. Now, granted, we're not authors, but the way we describe stuff could have that same, like those similar skills of, are we trying to evoke a certain image in people's minds? And it could be straight up, who is the thing I want to put my sword through? What am I going to fireball right now? That could be totally fine. you're still evoking an emotion or an action from people. And like I said, we could talk about this 10 more podcasts in a row. But we're going to move on to what I would like to call, even though it's 4 and 5, I'm going to call them 4A and 4B because I think they're really linked together.
They are.
But the first part is be impartial. And this has to do with, I think, really, really, really important. So I'm going to read it out, the little point, and then we're going to discuss it. It says, you are the judge of the rules, not the reactions or actions of the player. We're not judging the players and what they do. We're just trying to be, AKA, the ref of the rules. Now, what else does impartial imply to you guys? How do you bring it to your tables?
I think I wrote it out incorrectly originally. It's just in the statement, it is not you versus the players. You as the DM are not trying to win the combat. You as the DM are trying to give them a combat that is for them. It is not a versus situation. This is a co-op game. Being impartial means you as a referee, DM, GM, blah, 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 all the different ones, are not here to beat your players. You are here to give your players an experience. Being impartial helps with that. That you are here to say, this is what's happening. Now go. And not giving them You made me think about this more.
Well, we'll let Nog. Like, how do you, I guess, display this principle at your tables?
Sure. Yeah. So being impartial, I think, is just a tie-in to number 2, which is being consistent with the rules.
Yep.
It's just another way of saying it. I think all of us are pretty impartial. There's always going to be the I don't know, like the first thing that pops in my head, Keegan, is when you and I were talking about D&D, I don't know, some weeks back, and you had said something that kind of triggered me back in the day, and that was that.
Which one? You have to tell me. I've triggered.
Yeah, I know.
I'm a very upsetting person, evidently.
Yeah. Well, you told me once that it's impossible to kill a D&D character after a certain level, and that's that whole conversation pops into my head every time I look at this, because I'm like, yeah, I'm not here to purposely aim to, TPK, but if I have a scenario that they're aware of, hell yeah, we're gonna do that. I mean, all within the rules, and the dice giveth and taketh away, right? But again, I'm looking at these. I came into the mindset when you guys first gave me these lists that they sound very absolute. These are the Gygax Sith laws of the D&D universe, and I don't know, it rubbed me the wrong way with that, because I don't know if it's just because I'm monochromatic, but I see everything in black, white, and shades of gray, and there's always an exception to everything.
Oh, definitely.
But being impartial is probably one of the more straight black and white rules you can get. And it is true. You have to be able to set that stuff aside, and you're not playing for the character or the players. You're letting them do their thing, and you have a different role to play in the whole storytelling.
I have a story of being impartial, if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
A friend of mine was running a game, and he was running it with his girlfriend as well. She was one of the players with us. They were fighting. At one point, he had to look at her and say, okay, that's not going to work. And he had to explain the rule to her, because if he wasn't being impartial with it, he could have just said, go ahead and try. Oh, that doesn't work. I mean, he explained the rules as he interpreted it. And it could have caused a lot of problems with their relationship as well as in game, if he went off on a different tangent of letting his anger get in the way and not just reacting and not just being a judge of the rules. And there's too many guys that I have seen and played with. That's not going to work. That's stupid. No, you can't do that.
Yeah.
No. Let the rules handle it. You may think it's the most moronic thing, and I ran a game one time that was the stupidest thing in the world. They made a pie talk. Dumbest thing I ever heard of.
I'm shaking my head IRL, but that's yeah. No, I get it, and I agree. That's actually a really good testimony to how that should be. It really should be like that. Being able to, it's a different focus, right? The players are looking to again absorb that information, do something with that information, either as their character or as themselves, whatever they want to do. But that's not our focus as a DM. Our focus is entirely different. And for that, it is, well, this is how things work. And you explain that. And yeah, 100%. That's a really good story to share for that.
I would say that one of the most valuable things of being impartial, it adds to a lot of tension. And people may not think, like, how can being impartial add attention? Because if you're just saying, well, I'm impartial, these are the rules, and I'm judging the rules, these three, they're going to shoot that, the goblin's going to shoot that character on the ground. And in D&D, you can force and cancel out death rolls that way by just doing damage to them. And you're like, yep, the rules say that. As this happens, okay, we move on. And knowing that, that's, I think, going to like heighten the tension because players immediately are like, he's being impartial. Of course the goblin is going to do that. And the rules say he's supposed to do that. And I think that's like a frightening thing. And to me, that just ratchets up the drama and the intensity and the emotional stakes in the moment. So I think there's still a lot of value having this impartiality just permeate throughout all parts of our table.
I actually never thought of it that way. That's a really good point, though.
Yeah, I hate that you said that because now my wheels are turning too.
Well, let's move on because I think it connects perfectly to also the B part of being impersonal. That we, I'm going to highlight just the one part that we don't enjoy the plight of the players. Like this negative part, we don't become malicious and almost like sadistic in twisting the knife into the player. Just because we can as a GM. We have limitless tools and power, so to speak, at our disposal. We can always do the most absurd, destructive thing to them. But by being impersonal and just keeping our emotions in check, I think go a long way to reinforcing that first part, the A part.
I hate this rule.
Okay.
Out of these 5, this is the one that I hate the most.
Okay, no, I wasn't expecting this.
Because
explain that.
It's counterintuitive. So I am not as described.
It is very counterintuitive. Yes.
As it's described, I'm not allowed to, or I shouldn't openly enjoy a player's downfall, plight, problems, whatever. But if that is what it constitutes as, then I also shouldn't be celebrating their successes and their wins. Again, a black and white, very absolute rule, right? I have a problem with that. It doesn't necessarily mean that I take joy in slaughtering my players, which I occasionally do and laugh maniacally, but only when it's relevant and only when it is expected. Like we're playing a one shot. Everyone knows they're going to TPK by the end of the night. They just want to go out with the biggest blaze of glory. But life should be celebrated just like any other life that we have. The best example I have is at one point my players were lining up to take on this black dragon. They found its lair. It was inside this huge hollowed out tree inside a swamp, and they laid traps and everything, lured it out. And this one guy was, I forget I think we were playing Pathfinder. I think we were playing Pathfinder at the time. And one of my players was playing an alchemist with a bunch of weird mutagens. He was essentially going for like Goro, but multiple arms, and then just wanted to slam bombs into the thing. So he had like a one shot. He could do like 300 some odd damage. It was so fun to make. Anyway, the dragon came out, flew by. They missed their opener, and I rolled some crits. What do you do, right? So exactly. And this is something like, it was a huge cinematic moment for them, a huge epic moment. And we played from the get-go. I asked if everyone wanted to play the triple threat rule, the death threat rule, right? And we did. And 1 in 8, or what is it? 1 in 6,000 chance. I rolled 3 20s, chopped the dude in half. Everyone just panicked. Their plans fell apart immediately. They all retreated while the dragon was just gobbling on half of a body. At the end of that session, that player, who is also Ken, by the way, we took his paper, his character sheet, we ripped it in half very ceremoniously, and he was 100% okay with it. It's not that it's impersonal. It's that it was epic, and we celebrated what it was in our own way.
Yeah, it's. I have to agree with you. It is because you're playing together, you're supposed to enjoy everything. For me, in this rule, because it is, I also like how Keegan said it's more of a 4B than it is a 5th point, is if your player is just dumbstruck at the situation that occurred and is openly upset about it, you have to look at his emotions and say, I don't need to add to his, his bad feelings. Which is, the emotion should be kept at a minimum is one of the points. I can understand that in a way, but I believe being impersonal is not laughing at a player's plight and making them feel like crap or feel like they're stupid. That's where I take the impersonality, the be impersonal about, or where I take it from is.
Can we just change the rule instead of saying being impersonal? Can we say like be considerate of your players' emotions?
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, let's change it. Sorry, Gygax.
Okay, I was going to push back on it because I was trying to think, okay, what's he trying to get at? And maybe it is being considerate, it was the principle. But I don't think it was. At least just what I'm reading from this, right? I didn't have a sit down with him and interview him and get his thoughts on it.
So my understand the 2 bullet points, the 2 points that are below 5, were taken from 2 different sources.
Yeah, that's why I'm interpreting.
Go for it.
Right? That type of thing. But my interpretation is I push back on all this in 2 ways. One, I think it's a warning. I think it's a warning to do 2 things. One, why are you kicking them when they're down? No, keep your emotions out of it. You shouldn't be a tyrant and laughing while they're already having a difficult moment because of what's going on. And 2, you shouldn't over-celebrate because it's easy to want the best for the characters and the players and their characters to the point that you may start adjusting the reactions of the world in favor of them too far. Instead of having an honest reaction, you might be carrying it too far of like, no, their character's too cool. They need to get to this point. They need to accomplish this quest so they can finish and have this amazing moment. But if things are kind of naturally unfolding, and I don't mean random sniper on the roof encounter and some character gets wiped out. I mean just a natural something happened in game. I think if we get too invested, we may unknowingly start to put plot bubbles and plot armor on their characters a little too much, to the point that we're celebrating, to the point that, is there any tension left? So I think it's a warning for both sides. Are you going too far and being a total jerk? And are you going too far and now protecting characters because you just want to see them to keep playing?
Hey, Dwight, can I ask you a question on these? Is when these 5 rules came out, was it close to 1974 era?
The earliest book that I have, and it is the Dragon magazine that has this in an article, was 77.
Okay, so very soon after.
Very.
Okay. My next question then is back in the day, I wasn't even around then. Back in the day when this was all still growing, it was still new. Was there even campaign settings, or was everything meant to be played as like a module? Like, this is the book, you are playing the book.
Wow.
Because that's the vibe I get from these.
Very interesting, the context of it all.
Yeah, very. I think yes, because nobody knew how to make a campaign until AD&D came out, because everybody had the modules. Everybody was buying the modules to run a module. Nobody had, nowadays we have so many helps online and the books are written in such a way. DM's guide back then was nothing but something at the back of the book to say, when you're doing this, this is what you need to roll. When you're doing this, this is what you have to do. There was no help in getting people to build their own worlds. That came later. Am I answering your question? I feel like I'm rambling too much.
No, it's different.
Yeah, back in the day, people bought the modules. I own almost every module from basic D&D because that's the only way you could do it. Only until AD&D did they actually give you rules and guidelines on, this is how to create a world. Right. AD&D had the World Builder a book with the Wilderness book and all these other books that help people to develop their own worlds. So a lot of these, yes, are dealing with, guys, when you're getting ready with your module, make sure you're doing these points. So yes, back then, yes, they were geared specifically, I think, for that type of era of where not everybody was making their own worlds up.
Yeah. So again, going through this, I definitely get the thought of how they were made was meant to be this specific way. And there wasn't that gray area back then. Now, that's not to say that we can't take these 5 and adapt them, right? Like we just did with number 5. Instead of being impersonal, it's being, considerate. So there is still a lot of wisdom to be held, but I don't think it's as Sithy, and absolute as it once was. I don't know. What do you think, Kagan?
Sounds like your mind kind of got changed a little bit, and we're going to wrap up with final thoughts. Dwight, we have 5 points that you brought to us back from the past, back from the Stone Ages, as they were kind of figuring it out as they walked into the light for the first time. What's your final thoughts of the value of these points back in the day?
Back in the day or for today?
We'll start with back in the day, and then your final point of, do they have value today?
Back in the day, the points are very important when you're dealing with modules. Today, they're guidelines. They're to help you when you're making a module or when you're running a game.
Yes, that principles are timeless. And
principles are timeless, yes.
Why we can kind of like pick and interpret as this wisdom comes through the ages and hits us 50 years later, I still think by principle, there's still a lot of value. We basically want to make a very fun and engaging game. And these are things that we talk about in different words all the way up till now. This is GM Keegan. As always, we have DM Knock. And thank you, Dwight, our special guest, longtime DM, to bring these principles back up from Gygax's library, his head wisdom.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great night, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, community, for listening. Join RollNet's Discord now to continue the discussion with other GMs, DMs, and players about tonight's topic. Come back next time, where there's always a seat waiting for you at a table in a tavern.